Hey, our featured dish for this episode is titled From Godfather to Podfather. I'm Scott Harrell, Executive Director of Fresh Start Ministries. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by none other than the Podfather, the Godfather himself, Joe Cordovano. Joe is the co-founder of Fresh Start Ministries of Central Florida, a pastor, and a former executive director of this incredible organization. For the past 38 years, Joe, along with his wife, Kelly, has poured their hearts and soul into building Fresh Start from the ground up. And since Joe and the board entrusted me to carry the torch, he has finally taken a big step into retirement. We're thankful for that for them. But let's be honest, we're not going to let him get too far away. Joe remains a teacher in the program and is a dedicated board member as well. Same with Kelly. Today, we'll be diving into the origins of Fresh Start, the vision behind it, and the lessons learned along the way. And today, we're going to be able to talk in great detail with Joe Cordovano, the founder of Fresh Start Ministries. Thank you for tuning in. So let's get started. What are some of the core values that happened at the very beginning that are still the same today? I know that sometimes the methods change, but the message doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so what have you learned throughout that entire process that says, man, this is what we did at the very beginning, and we're still doing it today. This is not something that's changed because it's tried and true.
Well, one of the things that, let me explain this way. I took a lot of what I learned in my family, mm-hmm. which was good. I mean, it was strict, but it was good. We, for instance, every Sunday we ate what we called dinner at 2:00, and it was a huge meal. And you had to be there. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, I was engaged, and there was, no, you got to be here. Bring her with you, but you got to be here. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, it was just the way it was. And even when I was in my 20s. And so I took some of those values that I had learned. I had learned at Dunklin that I wasn't a very good worker. I was actually, I don't want to say lazy, but I thought I was entitled. Okay? I mean, I literally grew up, when I was born, my aunt went to Tiffany's in New York City and bought me a silver cup with my name on it and a spoon. So I literally was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, just about. I was the first boy in our family, so
sure,
that was it.
Yep.
And I thought I was entitled, and I found out when I went to Dunklin that nobody owed me anything. Mm-hmm. And of course I went through ministry in that first 6 years of being a Christian, and the 3 years working with Craig downtown, where even working with Craig, I thought we would do. My thinking was working with the homeless when nobody else wanted to work with. There was no coalition for the homeless. Churches weren't opening up during the wintertime. They wouldn't open up their doors. Mm-hmm. We went around literally and talked to places like Calvary Assembly and tried to get them to open up, let these people lay on the ground, but we can't let them stay out here in 30-degree weather, mm-hmm. Because there was nowhere else for them to go.
Right.
And so we did all that, and of course I patted myself on the back thinking, how wonderful I am, and what a great person I am, and how lucky God is to have me on his team. And in reality, I realized when I went to Dunklin, it was all for selfish reasons. It had nothing to do with really caring about the people. I wanted people to recognize Firewind Ministries. I wanted people to recognize the Good Samaritan Coffee House.
Wow.
I wanted people to recognize Craig Marlette and Joe Cordovano, and not necessarily because I felt that bad for the homeless people, but so there were things that we learned, work ethics that I learned at Dunklin that because they taught me how to be a good worker. they taught me not, like I said, my dad taught me a lot about the streets, and I didn't know I was an entrepreneur until, years and years later, and I realized that's what I was doing. I didn't even know what he was having me do. I thought, we would go out and buy fireworks, and I'd pack them up, and me and my buddy would make little bags and take orders, and we'd have little bags and staple them together, and with bills of lading on them, what they bought, 3 cherry bombs, and sell them, and as long as my dad got his money, I mean, we always paid him what we owed him, and then he fronted us the money, and then we go out and hawk all this stuff, and again, it was like, I'm running around town selling fireworks all over Syosset, in Nassau County in New York on Long Island, and probably one of the major guys selling fireworks, and I didn't even know it. I think I got stopped by the police one time, and I had like my money in one pocket, and then all this money I was collecting for the fireworks, and so the cop, empty your pockets, and so I put my money over here, and then he says, "What do you have to?" I said, "I don't know, I just have too much money to put in one pocket." I mean, I was making excuses. And he said, "I think you're the guy we're looking for." I had a list of how much everything cost. Because I couldn't remember it all, we had so many fireworks. And he said, "You're the guy we've been looking for." I talked my way out of it. I said, "Oh, no." I said, I don't know what you're talking." He says, "Well, where'd you get this list?" He says, "This is your list, and look at all this money." I said, "Oh, no." I says, "There's this guy down there," and I pointed him, and I gave him a description of this guy. They left me and ran down there, and I took off, man. But I had no clue what I was doing. But anyway, those are the things I learned. I learned how to do those things, and I learned how to be a good worker, and I learned how to be a man of my word, and I learned all those things, and those things we're trying to teach the guys here to this day.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that you've talked about, you got into it for a certain reason, and you started to be taught yourself on how to be a leader and a teacher, and at the same time, you were learning with these guys who are beginning at a certain stage of trying to get sober, and they're in the process as well of growing and changing.
Right.
And I find that really interesting that you're all trying to grow in your relationship with God, in your relationship with each other, in your relationship with your work and their sobriety. There's just a lot of moving parts here. But then when you finally get to the point where you really kind of come into your own, where you feel like, hey, I really own this. I really, I feel like I've learned so much that I can now be comfortable in this. How long did it take you to get there? Or did you?
I would have to probably say that it took. I didn't feel that way until we bought the trailer park. That's when I really felt like, okay, I've really done something. Because you got to understand, this was not the first time I came looking for a place. God had told me to go knock on doors plenty of times, and I would go around. I remember taking one guy, one real estate guy, took me all around Oviedo and to horse farms and stuff. I had this guy, and so he finally, at the end of the day, I mean, this is like a whole day thing, and we went to go look at about 6 or 7 different farms and stuff. And at the end of the day, he says, "Well, which one did you like?" And I said, "Well, I like this one, and this is it." He says, "Okay." He says, "Well, they're asking this much money." He says, "How much money you have down?" And of course, I'm a little bit of a wise guy, so I said, "Well," I says, "my dad has the cattle on 1,000 hills." And he looked at me. He says, "Your dad's in the cattle?" I says, "No." I says, "I'm talking about God." He said, "No." He says, "How much do you have?" I said, "Oh, I have $5,000. He went ballistic on me.
Yeah, right.
He was not a happy camper.
I showed you all this for $5,000 in your pocket.
He says, "That's not even going to cut it." But I would, anytime God told me to go knock on doors, I would go knock on doors, or I would tell people, or I would talk to people, and I did, and then when, to be honest with you, when I wasn't looking for it, this showed up.
Yeah.
And that's how that worked. So it wasn't until we took this place over as a trailer park that I really believed that
You can't go back now.
I'm not renting anymore. Now this is no longer well, if I don't make it, I can go down to become a chaplain at the 33rd Street or something, or get on as a pastor or.
You were all in.
Yeah, I was in, and that was it. And I realized, now we had a mortgage. Now we had, we had 18 trailers and 13 septic tanks.
Wow. Yeah.
I became proficient in changing out septic tanks and drain fields.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no turning back after that.
Yeah, there was no turning back,
man. You committed yourself.
It was wild, and
from the time of concept really to when you retired, there must have been some real game changers, like moments, game changing moments that you went, this was epic when this happened, or this was epic. It might have been with a client, it might have been with something that kind of changed your thought process. What were those? Name 2 or 3 of those big events that happened that were like, man, this was huge, and it kind of changed our direction, or it helped encourage us to maintain the same trajectory.
There's probably quite a few of them, but the one I remember the most is the day we moved in this building, and I say that because we moved in. And we had all the beds were wrapped in. I mean the mattresses. I mean we had all these mattresses, box springs, and all this stuff. And we were setting up the whole place. We finally got our CO, and we're setting up the whole place. So I brought everybody over here on a Sunday, and we're setting the whole place up. And one of the guys starts crying, and I said, I took him aside and I said, hey man, what's the matter? And he says. I've never slept on a new mattress before. That was a game changer. Wow. I never realized there was people like that. Wow. I mean, I always realized there was homeless, but it never equated. It never dawned on me that there were people that never slept on a new mattress before. Yeah. And that was a game changer. Some of the people that I've worked with, actually, Pastor Tim, who's the intake, the program director. We worked together. He came through the program, and I'm sure he told the story, if I remember correctly. But we actually had I don't know that we were friends, so to speak, as friends go, but we had a healthy relationship and respect for one another. And he always stood by my side when we were in the house in Winter Park, and I said that we had problems with zoning. I was devastated, and he had come through the program. He was my houseman at the time, we called him, and I always thought that I had to be like my dad and take everything on my own shoulders. And so he came to me and said, hey, Joe, I didn't go by Pastor Joe back then. He said, hey, Joe, he said, what's going on, man? And I told him, I mean, he knew what was going on, but I told him what I was feeling. And I just started crying. I says, Tim, I'm devastated, man. I says, I don't know where to start. I says, I've never done anything like this. He says, well, I was in construction. I says, yeah, but, he says, why don't you let me do this? That was a turning time in my life when I allowed somebody else to help me run this place, and we've become very good friends. We've become, I mean, I'm so proud that he went and started his own business and stuff like that, and then came back a while later and came to me and said, hey, I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing. And I said, that's because this is what you're supposed to be doing. I said, come to work for me as a counselor, and he did. And now he's the program director, and you know, you and him are running the whole shebang, and I'm just sitting back, you know, looking like always, just fat and sassy and pretty.
What do you want to be remembered for?
You know, it's funny. We're doing a teaching tonight about belief and behavior.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I'm coming back since I've retired.
Yeah.
And I felt like this is what God was telling me. And part of that teaching is tombstones about what you were before Christ and after. And this is, and I did this lesson at Dunklin.
Yeah.
So this is the real deal of what I put down that I've always kept it. I put down there what I want to be remembered for when I die is that I was a true man of God. I served God. I served his people, and then much, much more. Because at the time I just couldn't fit everything. I don't want to be known for anything other than the fact that I tried to help as many people as I could possibly help in my lifetime. You know, I never realized I had a heart for these types of people because I never thought I was one of them. So that's why I say these types of people. And yet I realized I'm one of the more fortunate ones because I was able to. I didn't lose everything in my addiction. I was a functioning addict. I could go to work. I mean, I would figure out find out from my boss how much overtime we could work. So I knew how much money at the end of the week I'd have to spend on getting high and getting drunk.
Yeah.
You know, and I always paid my bills and stuff like that. And so I always thought I was above these types of people that I'm helping. And so that was a big eye opener. Another eye opener was when we had a contract with the Department of Corrections, and we got our contract and we got our first guy. We actually got about 3 guys, but this one guy, he was an older guy. He was on death row, if I'm not mistaken. I guess they felt sorry for him. They let him out. I mean, this guy was in his 60s when he came to us. He'd been in prison since he was 18 years old and didn't know anything else. And again, this is one of those times I didn't realize what was going on. So he came in during the weekend. I see him on a Monday morning. I welcome him and this and that and blah, blah, blah. We do all the paperwork. And I said, okay. I says, go in this one building. I said, and get on the phone and start, finding out there's a newspaper in there and stuff and find out, start looking for work and stuff. And I went in my trailer, which was my office, and I could see that area. And he went in there and he never came out. He never came out. He never came out. And this was 9 o'clock in the morning. Now it's lunchtime. So I went in there and he's in there and he's crying. And I said, yo, I mean, what's wrong? And he was real embarrassed that I caught him crying. He wouldn't tell me. And he finally got him to tell me. He said, I keep dialing the phone number and they keep asking me for something called an area code. I don't know what an area code is. And it dawned on me, this guy he's been in prison all this time.
Wow, yeah. He's
got no clue. When he was 18 years old, we didn't have area codes.
Right.
So, okay, I help him, I pray with him, and then I send him, I says, okay, I says, go in the house. That time we had taken over the house, and that was our cafeteria. I says, there's some food out there. Just throw it in the microwave. And again, and I'm thinking, maybe I better go check up on this guy. And I went and sure enough, he's frustrated again because our microwaves were digital. And in prison, all they had was the knobs. And he didn't have a clue on how to get his food hot. And that was an eye-opener for us. I realized then that that yes, these people went to prison like my dad. I mean, granted, my dad went to federal prison and these guys were state. But my dad was so fortunate because he had enough street knowledge to know he survived in prison.
Well,
You know, that and the fact that he was able to make friends easy. My dad was doing the books for the prison, for the warden. My dad, he's not a bookkeeper,
right.
but he let him know he knew how to do numbers, and that was that.
Like Shawshank.
Yeah. And it was the craziest thing. And so I never realized that there were people that went in, because my dad didn't go in at a young age. He was, like I said, I was in my 20s already, And so that means he was in his 40s, I guess.
Yeah.
And so he had lived life somewhat. And it never dawned on me that there were guys that went in like kids and grew up in the prison system and didn't know anything else. And that made a big impact on me. At that point in time, I made it my goal to help as many people out of jail and prison as I could possibly help, and to teach them a better way.
Do you ever get overwhelmed by the number of people that have come through your program? Do you have any? Have you ever really thought about that?
I try to think about it, but we only recently, probably since we came into the building here, have kept things digitally.
Yeah.
So before that, it was all. Do I get overwhelmed when I go into when I've gone into our storage place and gotten rid of all the old files because they were over 7 years old and there's tons and tons and tons of them, and I realize that we've impacted a lot of people. Not a lot of people end up graduating our program, so to speak, compared to the number of people we take in. But God told me a long time ago and showed me that not everybody had to graduate the program, that sometimes we were just the planters, maybe the sowers. We were the guys that got the land ready. That kind of thing. Maybe sometimes we just watered, and that's all we did. And I've tried to teach that to my staff. And I know that all my staff understands that, or they did when I was running the show. And I think that's made a big impact on people, because we don't look at it. It's truly a ministry to us. See, the only reason we call ourselves a rehab is because at the time nobody would understand if I called ourselves a discipleship house. People just wouldn't get it, and I would have really nobody. So I figured a long time ago, let me call it a rehab, and then people who needed help would call us, and then we could teach them and disciple them in the ways of the Lord. Yeah. And to this day, that still goes on. As a matter of fact, when I used to teach all the time, I'd kid around with the guys and tell them that God really skunked them because they thought they were coming to a rehab. I said, no, you didn't. You came to a discipleship house. I said, that's nothing to do with your drugs or your alcohol. This has to do with the way you're thinking and the way you're feeling. Yeah. And that's what we teach them a lot about, is what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Like I said, tonight we're doing belief and behavior, because what you believe you really are. My mentor, Mickey, used to say, what's down in the well will always come up in the bucket. Not that I understood that back then, but I do now. But good. And that's what we try to teach them, to be, not to be perfect, and not to think they have to be perfect, but to serve God to the best of His ability, not theirs. Yeah. And if they do that, then we have a lot of success stories. As a matter of fact, this week we're coming up on our legacy thing, and that you guys are putting on for us, for Kelly and I, and the vision of Fresh Start, the fresh vision, and there's been a lot of people calling us up, and we just this week, in the last 2 days or 3 days, we've had numerous phone calls and texts. I had one guy just call me up and crying on the phone. He's got 10 years of sobriety. It was the second time he came through.
Wow. Yep.
First time he fell flat on his face.
Yeah.
And he comes from a Christian home.
Yeah.
And parents were missionaries.
Yeah.
And now he's thanking me, and he's running a whole business, and
Yeah.
it's those kind of things.
Yeah.
Another guy went, I can't tell you how many guys have gone to college and gotten married and done it the right way now, and not everybody stayed doing it the right way from the beginning, but everybody has ended up doing it the right
Yeah.
way. And again, we go on the premise that if you bring up a child in the way in the way of the Lord, then they will always return. And that's the premise we go on around here, is that if we give them everything we have, if I can impart on them, let's say tonight when I'm teaching, if I can impart on them what an impact God has made on my life, and the fact that I want them to have exactly what I have. I have a wife that I've been married to for, she's going to kill me, 47 years or something like that. Can't remember really.
We'll edit that part out.
I
Don't
do,
worry.
yeah. I do remember we got married in 1977, so that much I remember. I can't do the math in my head, but that much I remember. But if they could have that, a woman that I never had to worry about. And Kelly worked with a defense contractor for 10 years, and I never had to worry while I was doing this who's sleeping in my bed or whose bed she's sleeping in. Never had to worry about that. Didn't have to worry about when we had kids whether she was going to be home for my kids. Didn't have to worry. See, that's what I want for these guys. Mm-hmm. A lot of them haven't come from that, but that's what I want for them. Mm-hmm. And if I can impart that on them and get them to understand that and see that's all that this is about, then just maybe we can make a difference in some of their lives.
Yeah, yeah. The last thing I would end on is, we've had a lot of people from 20 years ago to today. We just have it's a different breed.
Right.
And you've seen that morph and change. It's different people coming through the door, different generations, different expectations. If you're out there and you're watching this podcast and you're saying, okay, what's a nugget of information that I can take with me because I'm either an addict or I'm a family member that's trying to deal with somebody who's an addict? What is the takeaway box as we talk about, our best conversations happen here around the kitchen table? What's the takeout? What are we going to pack up in a box from the Podfather, Godfather himself? And share some wisdom just of, here's the nugget. If you don't get anything else, get this.
I think the nugget is got to be this, Scott, that what God has called us to do here at Fresh Start, we talk about addictions and we talk about alcoholism, but it's really about life-controlling problems. Whether you have some whatever your addiction is, money, porn, shopping, I mean eating, whatever it is, we've helped all kinds of people. Gambling, it's a little harder for us to deal with some of them, but because the guys are out and working every day, but I think that's the thing, is that it's about life controlling problems. And I say that because every one of us, and this is what I learned, that every one of us has life controlling problems. Mm-hmm. And again, to quote my mentor, my spiritual daddy, there's not 5 cents of difference between the best of us and the worst of us. Mm-hmm. And that is something that God taught me through him. And that's the way I see it. And I didn't always see it that way. But how can we help each individual grow in the Lord in their own way, and yet be a part of the body of Christ here that meets here at Fresh Start. Because that's what it's about. It's about the body of Christ, you know, and just helping people. If I could impact tonight, for instance, when I teach, if I can impact one man to look at things differently the way I had been able to look at things differently, and to grow up, because I wasn't grown up. I was 27 years old or whatever it was when I went to Dunklin, but I was far from grown up. And they were right. Our marriage was a mess. We just didn't know it. If I can impact one guy that way and get him to open up and maybe change some of his thinking tonight, I'm good to go. I could go home and be with the Lord today. I did what I was supposed to do. Now, I think we've made more of an impact than that, but that would be it. That's the takeout. Yeah. Takeout is that God can change your life if you allow him to. And he will if you allow him to. But you got to allow him to.
That's pretty good, pretty full takeout box, man. Thank you. Listen, I can't tell you thanks
That was
enough.
all the tacos.
No Italian food in there?
Yeah, no, not today.
I do appreciate it, man. Listen, thank you for everything.
All right, brother.
I love you, brother, man.
All right.
Did a great job, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you. Hey, are you interested in becoming a title sponsor of Addiction Kitchen? Reach out to us using the contact information below, and we'll be in touch. Plus, if you'd like to join us in helping others, consider donating just $20 a month at freshstartministries.com/donate. Some people even do it for one full year. Every bit makes a difference. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it on YouTube or Facebook. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll know when our next episode drops. We'd also love to hear from you. So drop your questions or comments below, and we'll do our best to address them in the future episodes.